In the winter of 2009, 26-year-old Paula Sladewski lived with her boyfriend, 34-year-old Kevin Smith, in Rancho Cucamonga, California. Sladewski was an aspiring model and exotic dancer. In 2003, she appeared in the home video, Playboy, The Ultimate Playmate Search. The video was a competition to find a woman to be Playmate of the Month for Playboy's 50th anniversary issue. Sladewski was one of 50 finalists. Clem worked as a realtor. Their relationship was volatile and at times violent. In 2009, Sladewski was arrested after breaking a bottle over Clem's head. However, Clem refused to press charges. Sladewski and Clem were originally from Michigan but relocated to California in 2008. In late November and early 2009, they visited family in Michigan. On November 28, 2009, Clem was arrested in Southfield, Michigan. He had stolen money from Sladewski's purse, and when she confronted him, he slapped her. 5 days later, on December 3, 2009, Sladewski was out, and when she returned to their hotel room, she found Clem passed out and liquor bottles were on the floor. Sladewski was angry and woke him up. They argued and she threatened to call security. When she picked up the phone, he punched her in the face. He then knocked the phone out of her hand so hard that the cord came out of the wall. Sladewski fled from the room and Clem followed her to the lobby. Clem was arrested and Sladewski was taken to the hospital. She had suffered a broken nose and fractured cheekbone. But by the end of 2009, they appeared to have made amends, although Sladewski had not dropped the assault charges against Clem. For New Year's Eve 2009, they decided to go to Miami, Florida. On New Year's Eve, they attended a Lady Gaga concert. After the concert, they stayed in Miami and continued to party. Around 5:30 a.m. on January 3, 2010, they went to Club Space, an after-hours nightclub. At 7:15 a.m., the couple were told to leave the club. The club manager claims the couple got into a physical altercation. Other men were interested in Sladewski, and Clem tried to pull her out of the club by her arm. Clem said that the staff simply overheard them talking. He told her it was time to go, and Sladewski said she didn't want to leave. He claims that things did not get physical. The club's policy was to split up a fighting couple and have them leave separately. Clem was escorted out first, and then Sladewski about 5 minutes later. Kevin and Clem awoke at 11 a.m. in their hotel room, alone. Clem had Sladewski's phone when he was kicked out of the club. He always held onto her phone when they went out clubbing, so he was unable to call her. He waited for her to call, but he didn't hear from her. Clem called her friends and family, and no one else had heard from her. That afternoon, Clem tried to file a missing persons report, but he was told it was too early. So that night, he hired a private investigator. The next day, the PI took him to the police station where he had contacts. Clem told the detective that after the club, he got in a cab and returned to the hotel. He had not seen or heard from Sladewski since leaving the club. A detective and the PI went to Club Space, and the manager allowed them to review the surveillance footage. On video, they saw Clem being escorted out of the club. 5 minutes later, Sladewski is seen being escorted out. But what happened after that is a mystery. Clem and the PI started handing out flyers near the club and asked people they had seen Sladewski. Turns out that about 14 hours after Sladewski went missing, people in a neighborhood in North Miami, a Miami suburb, called the police. There was a dumpster on fire behind a propane gas dealership. Flames were shooting out of the dumpster. The fire was extinguished and a body was discovered inside of it. It was burned beyond recognition and the cause of death could not be determined. 3 days after Sladewski went missing, Clem called the North Miami Medical Examiner's office and told them he was looking for his girlfriend. They thought she might be the charred body. Using dental records, it was determined to be the body of 34-year-old Paula Sladewski. Her remains had to be identified using dental records. The body was about 10 miles from the nightclub. The most obvious suspect was Kevin Camm. Sladewski's parents were sure they had killed her. The couple had a history of violence. Then, just before Sladewski went missing, they had argued because she was receiving attention from other men. The police interviewed Camm for 12 hours. He was adamant he had nothing to do with the murder. The police verified that after he left the club, he got into a taxi and was at his hotel until he reported Sladewski missing. After going to the police station, all his time could also be accounted for. Their hotel room was searched and there was no signs of a struggle. Also, if he did kill her, he would have needed a car to transport the body to North Miami. Camm did not have a car in Miami and he did not know the city well. So the police eliminated him as a suspect. Also, based on the footage from the club, the police eliminated the staff at Club Space as the killer. The club had about 20 security cameras, and all the staff were accounted for when Sladewski went missing. Now the staff left before the club closed in the afternoon. They had to check in and out using a fingerprint scanner. The club did not have any cameras recording the outside of the club. The door manager said he remembered seeing Sladewski walking away with a black man with a beard. They were heading to a nearby parking lot. A sketch of the man was released. A man matching the sketch was seen outside the club 2 weeks after the murder, and the police were called. The man was questioned, but he wasn't charged. Another witness contacted the PI and said he was walking his dog near Club Space that morning. He saw a woman matching Sladewski's description walking alone. A van stopped and picked her up. One of the biggest problems is that the police are unsure what happened in the 14 hours between when Sladewski left the club and when her body was found, other than that she was murdered, put in the dumpster, and set ablaze. The leading theory is that Paula Sladewski was killed by someone she had met inside the club. She was probably familiar with him and may have let her guard down. He also probably took advantage of her intoxicated state. He kidnapped her, probably sexually assaulted her, and murdered her, most likely by strangling or suffocating her. He then put her body in the dumpster and started the fire to possibly destroy any physical evidence like DNA. It's been over 15 years since the murder of 26-year-old Paula Sladewski and it is still unsolved. It is considered a cold case. On July 12, 1997, 4 men, Michael Morrow, David Nunez, Mark Tavez, and Donnie Oliveira, were heading to a bachelor party in Kitimat, British Columbia, Canada. All the young men, with the exception of Nunez, were 20 years old. Nunez was 21. First, they had to meet a friend who was camping at Hirsch Creek Park. They pulled onto a dead-end road. Following behind them was 42-year-old Kevin Vermette. For several months, 2 of the young men, Donnie Oliveira and David Nunez, had been feuding with Vermette. Vermette was a handyman who lived and worked at a local motel. He did work in exchange for free lodging. Vermette was a loner who was known for his short temper. The feud between Vermette and the 2 young men stemmed from their time at the gym. Vermette didn't like the young men playing rap music at the gym. He even went off on a racist tirade about the music. After that, there were a few verbal spats between Vermette and the young men. One time it got physical. Vermette punched Oliveira, then the fight was broken up. Then one day, Vermette discovered that the tires on one of his vehicles had been slashed. The night when Vermette followed the 4 young men down the road, he was armed with a 12-gauge sawed-off shotgun. When the 4 men got out of their vehicle, Vermette opened fire on them. He fired 8 shots at them. He then calmly got back into his vehicle and drove away. People in the area heard the gunshots and they called the police. First responders arrived in the area. 20-year-old Michael Morrow, 20-year-old Mark Tevis, and 21-year-old David Nunez were all dead. 20-year-old Donnie Oliveira was alive, but he had lost 60% of his blood. He was taken to the hospital and ultimately survived his injuries. One person saw Vermette's pickup truck and told the police the license plate. The police descended on the motel where Vermette lived and they found both of Vermette's vehicles parked out front. But by the time they arrived, Vermette was gone and his room had been cleaned out. With his dog, he had walked into the brush and he was never seen again. The police believe that the murders were over the slashed tires. During their investigation, the police learned that someone other than Oliveira and Nunez had slashed the tires. The other two young men who were killed had never met Vermette. There were two massive searches for Vermette, but no trace of him was found. Vermette liked the outdoors and had survivalist training. However, it's suspected that he had help. The police believe that Vermette moved away from the area at some point. He was known to work as a carpenter, handyman, and truck driver. He also liked living in hotels and motels. He was also a loner who kept to himself. The police believe that this type of lifestyle made it easier for him to stay undetected. In 2010, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police released this age-enhanced image of him. 14 years later, in 2014, the police released another age-enhanced image of what he might look like at age 70. This suggests that the RCMP believes that Vermette is still alive. There was a $25,000 reward, but it has expired. Today, there's a $2,000 reward for information leading to his capture. At the time of this recording, Kevin Vermette is 71 years old. He's 5'9" and weighed 161 pounds when he went missing. His hair was brown and he has blue eyes. Vermette was meticulous about his hygiene, liked to keep physically fit, and did not like people invading his personal space. He has 3 tattoos. On his left arm he has a coyote with a moon and a dagger through a rose. On his right arm there is a cap with the word lucky inscribed below it. It's been 28 years since Kevin Vermette committed the triple homicide and attempted murder, and the case remains unresolved. On August 26, 1990, the police were called to the apartment of 18-year-old Sonia Larson and 17-year-old Christina Powell in Gainesville, Florida. No one had heard from them in 3 days. Sonia and Christina were both students at the University of Florida. Their apartment was about a mile from the university's main campus. Sonia wanted to be an elementary school teacher, and Christina was a theology student. When the police got to their apartment, they found a gruesome scene. Sonia Larson had been beaten, sexually assaulted, stabbed multiple times, and mutilated. Christina Powell had also been sexually assaulted and stabbed 5 times in the chest and the back. Her body was posed in a sexually suggestive manner. Both women had been bound with tape. The killer had removed the tape and taken it with him. The killer also tried to destroy physical evidence by washing the victims with dish soap. Nothing had been stolen, and there were no signs of a break-in or forced entry. The next day, the police were called to another woman's apartment about 3 miles away. 18-year-old Krista Hoyt attended Santa Fe Community College. She was also a part-time records clerk for the sheriff's department. A sheriff's deputy went to her apartment when she didn't show up for work. He found a gruesome scene in her apartment. Krista's disemboweled body was posed so it was sitting on the edge of the bed. She had also been decapitated. Her head was sitting upright on the top shelf of a bookcase in the bedroom. The head was posed to make it look like it was staring at the body. She had been stabbed multiple times. It's believed that the killer removed the latch on the sliding glass door when she was out. He waited inside for her to return home and then attacked her. Like the other two victims, Krista had been bound with tape, but the killer took the tape with him. The police were sure that all three murders were the work of one man. Unfortunately, they had no idea who he was. On August 28, 1990, for the third day in a row, the police were called to an apartment where students lived. Manuel Taboado and Tracy Paulus were both 23 and lived together. They were just roommates and not romantically involved. Tracy liked having a male roommate because it made her feel safe. Manuel was a large man who played offensive guard in high school. Tracy had been stabbed 3 times and Manuel had been stabbed 31 times. Tracy had been sexually assaulted before and after death. These 2 murders were different than the other 3. Notably, there were pry marks on the door frame, so it's believed that the killer had broken in. Secondly, neither body was mutilated, but they were sure it was the same man who killed them. They thought that the killer was possibly disrupted before he could do anything to their bodies. The police determined that Sonia Larson and Christina Powell were murdered on August 24th, Krista Hoyt on the 25th, and Tracy Paulus and Manuel Taboada were killed on the 27th. The media dubbed the killer the Gainesville Ripper. In the days after the murders, the police did not make an arrest in the case, but they did have a suspect, 18-year-old Edward Humphrey. Humphrey had scars on his face from a car accident. He had a history of mental illness. He was also known to carry knives. Humphrey had lived in the same apartment building as the last murder victims, Manuel Taboada and Tracy Paulus. He supposedly had a crush on Tracy. On August 30th, 1990, 2 days after Tracy and Manuel's bodies were found, Humphrey was arrested for assaulting his grandmother. However, the police found no physical evidence, like fingerprints, that placed Humphrey at any of the crime scenes. DNA had been found at all 3 crime scenes, and it belonged to the same man. In October 1990, the police learned it was not Humphrey's DNA, so he was cleared as a suspect. Around the same time that the police learned that Humphrey's DNA did not match the Gainesville Ripper's DNA, the Miami Herald published an article about the similarities between the Gainesville serial murders and the mass murder in Shreveport, Louisiana, nearly 10 months earlier. 55-year-old Tom Grissom lived with his 24-year-old daughter, Julie, and his 8-year-old grandson, Sean Grissom. Sean was Julie's nephew. On November 6, 1989, their family could not get a hold of them. They called the police and asked them to go to the home to check on them. 55-year-old Tom Grissom's body was found in the laundry room. He had been stabbed multiple times in the chest. 8-year-old Sean had been murdered in the living room. He had been stabbed once in the chest. The blade went through his torso and came out his back. The nude, dead body of 24-year-old Julie was in her bed. It was lying in a sexually suggestive manner. She had been stabbed and slashed repeatedly in the back with a knife. The killer had also bitten her breasts. The killer had used vinegar to try to destroy physical evidence on and inside Julie's body. Julie had been bound with tape, and the killer had taken the tape with him. It is believed the mass murder was committed the night before the bodies were found. The Miami Herald pointed out that all the targets of the murders were young, petite brunettes. In Julie Grissom's murder and some of the Gainesville murders, the killer had used cleaning liquid, like vinegar and dish soap, to wash areas of the victim's body, hoping to destroy evidence. Also, the killer used tape to bind the victims and took the tape with him. Several of the bodies have been posed in a sexually suggestive manner by the killer. Notably, their hair was fanned out over their heads. The Gainesville police had been talking to the police in Shreveport for months before the article was published. Initially, they did not believe it was committed by the same man. But after Edward Humphrey was eliminated as a suspect, they thought that there was a good chance the mass murder in Shreveport and the serial murders in Gainesville were connected. But they didn't know who was responsible for the 8 murders. Then, weeks later, in November 1990, the police were given the name of a person to investigate, Danny Harold Rolling. A woman living in Shreveport called Crime Stoppers because she had the nagging feeling that Danny was the killer. The woman explained that she and her husband had befriended Danny when they met him at church. He came over to their Shreveport home frequently. Then, one day, several months after the Grissoms were murdered, her husband said Rolling was no longer welcome at their home. Rolling had admitted to him that he liked to stab people. At the end of August 1990, the woman was in the Florida Panhandle and she heard about the Gainesville Ripper murders. Something Danny said frequently stuck out to her and kept nagging at her. He said, quote, "One day I'm going to leave this town and I'm going to where the girls are beautiful and I can just lie in the sun and watch beautiful women all day," unquote. So the police began to investigate Danny Rolling. Danny was born in May 1954 in Shreveport. His father, James, was a police officer. James had a traumatic childhood and his family was plagued by serious mental illness. One day when James was a boy, his grandmother was soaking her feet. His grandfather came up behind her and slit her throat. James witnessed the murder. James was incredibly abusive to his wife, Claudia, and his sons, Danny and Danny's younger brother, Kevin. He started being Danny when he was just a toddler. As Danny got older, he was beaten several times a week. His mother left his father several times, but always came back. Danny was held back in school several times because he missed class so often because of the abuse. When Danny was 11, he started drinking. He then started using drugs like marijuana and LSD. In July 1979, 25-year-old Danny was sentenced to 6 years in prison for robbing 3 grocery stores. He tried to escape several times. He was released in June 1984. In March 1986, 31-year-old Danny was convicted again of robbing a grocery store and he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. He was paroled in July 1988. A year and a half later, the Grissoms were killed. About 6 months after the mass murder, on May 18, 1990, 35-year-old Danny got into an argument with his father. It turned into a gunfight between the two men. Danny was unharmed, but his father was shot in the stomach and the forehead. His father survived, but he lost an eye and an ear. Believing he had killed his father, Danny fled town. In November 1990, when the police began to investigate Danny Rolling, he wasn't difficult to find. He was serving a life sentence in Florida. On September 7, 1990, less than 2 weeks after the Gainesville murders, Danny robbed a grocery store in Ocala, Florida. He led the police on a high-speed chase as he tried to escape, and he crashed his car. He was unharmed and taken into custody. On September 17, 1990, Danny pleaded guilty to robbery. He was sentenced to life in prison because he was a repeat offender. Knowing Danny's background gave the police new insight into the investigation. Hours before Krista Hoyt was killed, there was a bank robbery about half a mile from her home. Since Rolling had a history of committing armed robberies, the police thought it was possible he robbed the bank. During the robbery, a teller put a dye pack in the bag with the money she gave to the robber. Hours after the bank robbery, a police officer saw 2 men acting suspiciously near the edge of the woods close to the bank. The officer followed them back to their campsite in the woods. When he ordered them to stop, one man ran away. The officer arrested the other man. He said he knew nothing about the other man. He had nothing to do with the bank robbery. The officer searched the campsite and found several things, including dye-stained money, a brown ski mask, a 9mm handgun, and a cassette player with a tape in it. At the time, the police had no reason to suspect that any of the items were connected to the murders. After all the victims had been stabbed and not shot. The police did not listen to the tape and the recorder. Luckily, it was still being stored in the evidence locker. They retrieved the tape and listened to it. It was a recording of a man singing and talking. Then the man said his full name, Danny Rolling. The police now had evidence that Danny was in the area during the Gainesville Ripper murders. In January 1991, while in prison, Danny had a tooth extracted. A DNA profile was created from the tooth. It was then compared to the DNA of the Gainesville Ripper. It was a match. In November 1991, Danny Rolling was charged with 5 murders. Danny eventually confessed to the murders, but he did it in an odd way. He had another inmate, Bobby Lewis, who was on death row for killing a drug dealer, write his confession. Danny then agreed to meet with the investigators, but only if Lewis confessed for him. Lewis detailed the murders and told the police only things the killer would have known. Then the detectives asked Danny if the statements were true, and he confirmed that they were. Lewis told detectives new details about the murders they didn't know. For example, after killing Krista Hoyt, Danny returned to the crime scene because he thought he had left his wallet there. It was when he returned that he decided to decapitate her. Danny explained that he had multiple personalities. One was Nad, which is Danny spelled backwards. He said Nad was not a good person, but he wasn't evil. The other personality, Gemini, was the evil personality that was responsible for the murders. Danny Rolling went to trial in Florida in February 1994. He pleaded guilty to the murders, so the trial was to see if he should be sentenced to death or life in prison. His lawyer argued for leniency because Danny had suffered horrifying abuse at the hands of his father. He also said that Danny had a history of mental illness. Danny also claimed he had multiple personalities. The prosecution argued that Danny was lying about the other personalities. They claimed he got the idea from seeing the movie The Exorcist 3, which he saw in Gainesville. Danny Rolling was sentenced to death. He spent 12 years on death row. Danny was scheduled to die on October 25, 2006. Danny's last meal was lobster tail, butterfly shrimp, baked potato, strawberry cheesecake, and sweet tea. Before he was taken to the death chamber, he handed a note to his spiritual advisor. In the note, he confessed to the murders of the Grissams. For Danny's last statement, he sang Christian songs for 2 minutes. 52-year-old Danny Harold Rolling was pronounced dead at 6:13 p.m. Danny Rolling and his brutal series of murders in Gainesville were the inspiration for the 1996 slasher film Scream. In May 1983, 32-year-old Melvin Douglas Davis broke up with his girlfriend, 26-year-old Naomi Easley. Melvin, who lived in Austin, Texas, had a large family that included 16 brothers and sisters. Melvin and Naomi had dated in 1978, but they broke up. They reconnected in 1981. In 1982, they moved in together and lived together for 5 months. Then in May 1983, Melvin broke it off and moved back in with his oldest brother, John Henry Davis. Melvin and John had previously lived together for 15 years. Naomi did not take the breakup well. A few weeks after the relationship ended, Naomi sent Melvin a letter that in part reads, quote, "You hurt me too many times. Now every time you hurt me, I do something to hurt you. I don't understand what's happening to me. I love you. I hate hurting you, but I can't seem to stop. I feel like I'm losing my mind. I'm slowly losing control of myself. When I left you at the park, I went to a pawn shop and bought a gun, then to Academy for bullets. I had it in my mind that I would threaten to shoot you if you did not start treating me better. This is the final straw. I realize now if I keep going this way, I will end up hurting you physically, possibly killing you. I know in my heart that I do not want to do that." Unquote. Naomi also made harassing phone calls to Melvin. She wrote letters to his workplace and tried to get him fired. Melvin's brother, John, owned a race car, and they kept it at their home. One day, they found the tires on the car had been slashed, and the tires on the trailer that transported the race car had also been slashed. A few weeks later, on July 15th, Melvin went to work. Melvin and several of his family members worked for the City of Austin's Energy Department. When Melvin got to work, Naomi was waiting for him. She pulled out a gun from her purse. Melvin was able to wrestle it away from her. She went to her car and then walked back up to Melvin. She demanded her gun back, but Melvin refused to give it back. She then pulled out a butcher knife. Melvin was able to wrestle away from her. This was the second time Naomi had threatened him with a gun, and he took the gun away from her. Because of this incident, Melvin was able to get a peace bond, which is similar to a restraining order. Then one night, Melvin's brother, John, returned to their home after work. He discovered that someone had tried to start a fire in his bedroom and his clothes had been cut up. After the tires on the race car were slashed, the race car was put in the garage at their parents' home. Then the garage was set on fire and the car was destroyed. Melvin's brother, 23-year-old Ronnie, lived in a different home than the one John and Melvin lived in. On October 30th, Ronnie entered his home and realized someone was there. He bolted out the door and went back to his car. 3 shots were fired at him, but Ronnie was not hit. On November 18th, Melvin was leaving his home to go to work. As he walked out of the house, he noticed the patio light wasn't working. He thought that was odd, and as he walked to his car, he got a strange feeling. He turned around and saw Naomi coming towards him. He ran and Naomi fired her gun at him. He managed to get away, but not unscathed. He was shot in the left arm. He went to the hospital and his arm was treated for a gunshot wound. Naomi was arrested but released on bond. 3 days later, John, with whom Melvin lived, was shot at as he was leaving his home. John was not hit. Gracie Nell Nash was Melvin's older sister. She was a nurse at a nursing home in Austin. She was a divorced mother of 2. In the winter of 1983, she had a steady boyfriend. On the day after Christmas, 39-year-old Gracie went to work. She finished her shift at 11 p.m. and walked out of the nursing home. Tragically, she never made it home. The next morning, Gracie's mother received a disturbing phone call. The caller was a woman who was speaking with a muffled voice. She said, quote, "If you want to see your daughter alive again, tell your son to drop the charges against the woman," unquote. The next day, Gracie's car was found abandoned. There was a lot of blood in the car. Based on the amount of blood in the car, the police suspected that Gracie was dead. However, they had no idea where her body was. The police also believed she was dead before the phone call was made, demanding the charges against Naomi be dropped. The police questioned Naomi Easley, and she said she didn't do anything to Gracie. She said she was at home when Gracie went missing. The police could not find any evidence that connected Naomi to Gracie's disappearance, so no charges were laid. About 6 weeks later, on February 3rd, John and Melvin worked together and left their workplace at about the same time. Melvin had plans for the night and didn't go home. John went home and it appeared that someone was lying in wait for him. In front of his house, 43-year-old John Davis was shot 3 times, once in the head, once in the right arm, and once in the left arm. He died from his wounds. Once again, Naomi Easley was the suspect, and she was questioned. But once again, there was no evidence that connected Naomi to the crime. 27-year-old Naomi Easley went to trial for shooting Melvin Davis in March 1984. She was facing charges of aggravated assault and attempted murder. The main evidence against her was Melvin identifying her as the shooter. On the stand, Naomi admitted she had harassed and stalked Melvin, but swore she didn't shoot anyone. The defense pointed out that Melvin said it was dark because the patio light wasn't working. They argued he did not get a good look at the shooter. He may have assumed the shooter was Naomi because of the stalking, but it would have been impossible for him to make a positive identification. The defense also pointed out that there was no physical evidence in the case. What the jury didn't hear was that Melvin's sister went missing and his brother was murdered during Naomi's 9-month reign of terror. She had not been charged in connection with either crime, so those crimes were not considered evidence. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They were hopelessly deadlocked. 9 people had voted to convict and 3 others had voted to acquit. But there was not even a consensus among the people who wanted to convict. 3 wanted to convict her of attempted murder and 6 believed she was guilty of aggravated assault. So a mistrial was declared. The prosecution planned on retrying her, but they saw the difficulty in prosecuting the case. So Naomi was offered a plea deal, which she accepted. In January 1984, she pleaded guilty to aggravated assault, and she was sentenced to 10 years of probation. It was the only conviction stemming from the 9 months of stalking that involved breaking and entering, destruction of property, arson, multiple attempted murders, a disappearance, and a murder. About 2 years later, Naomi Easley got married to a man named Kenneth Moore. 3 years later, the marriage was in trouble and the couple were estranged. On November 5, 1989, Kent called the police and said that Easley had been making harassing phone calls. He said he was concerned about his safety because of his wife's history. 4 hours later, Kent called 911. He had been shot 5 times, once in the head, abdomen, and left hand, and twice in the chest. He was still conscious when he was taken to the hospital. He said his wife was the shooter. 40-year-old Ken Moore died about an hour after his arrival at the hospital. 33-year-old Naomi Easley Moore was arrested a short time later. Naomi went to trial in September 1990. The defense once again argued that there was no physical evidence. The prosecution told the jury that at the time of Kent's murder, Naomi was on probation after being convicted of shooting another man who had left her. Also, as Kent Moore was dying, he identified her as the shooter. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. They found Naomi guilty of murder. She was sentenced to 75 years of prison. The disappearance of 39-year-old Gracie Nell Nash is officially unsolved, and her remains have never been found. The murder of her brother, 43-year-old John Davis, is also officially unsolved. Naomi is the only suspect in their cases. 69-year-old Naomi Easley Moore is serving her sentence at the Dr. Lane Murray Unit in Gatesville, Texas. She was first up for parole in November 2004, but she has never been granted it. She'll be up for parole again in November 2025. In September 2000, the Camm family lived in Georgetown, Indiana. 36-year-old David Camm had been a trooper with the state police for 10 years. About 4 months earlier, he had retired to work as a salesman for his uncle's basement waterproofing business. He retired after he and 2 other troopers were accused of assaulting a 19-year-old man after a high-speed chase. David was cleared of all wrongdoing. He decided to leave the state police because he didn't feel that his department supported him. David and his 35-year-old wife, Camm, had been married for 11 years. They were set up by mutual friends. It was David's second marriage. He had married his high school sweetheart, and they had a child. They divorced after 3 years of marriage. Camm was a financial analyst. Camm and David had 2 children, 7-year-old Brad and 5-year-old Jill. On September 28, 2000, both Camm and David worked. After work, Camm picked up the kids from her parents' home. It was common for a family member to care for the kids after school. Then Camm and the children went to the Riverside Swim Club because Brad was on the swim team. His plea, they returned home around 7:30 p.m. At 9:30 p.m., David called the local state police barracks non-emergency line. He said that his family was dead. The police arrived at the family's home. David said he had been playing basketball in the gymnasium of a nearby church. He departed from home around 7 p.m., then he left the gym around 9:20 p.m. When he got home, he found his 35-year-old wife, Camm, on the floor of the garage. Her pants were off and she was barefoot. Her shoes were found on top of her vehicle. Both children, 7-year-old Brad and 5-year-old Jill, were in the back seat. Jill also had been shot in the head. David said he thought Brad might be alive because he didn't see a head wound. He reached over Jill's body and pulled Brad out of the car. He laid Brad down close to Kim's body and started performing CPR. When he saw that there were no signs of life, he called the police barracks where he used to work. Kim and Jill were both shot in the head a single time. Brad was shot once in the left side of the torso. They were all shot at close range with a .38 caliber handgun. It's believed they were killed just after they arrived home. Kim had just gotten out of the car when they were attacked. Jill was still buckled into her seat. Brad was wearing damp swim trunks. It's believed that Brad was trying to escape when he was shot. Under Brad's body was a sweatshirt. The pathologist found evidence that 5-year-old Jill had been sexually abused within 24 hours of the murder. It did not appear that Kim had been sexually assaulted. The police quickly developed a suspect, David Camm. About 72 hours after the bodies were discovered, David was arrested. The police found 15 women who had been in a relationship with David while he was married to Kim. For example, in 1995, when Kim was pregnant with Jill, David had an affair. It led to their separation. They got some counseling from David's uncle, who was a reverend. After 4 months, David and Kim got back together. The police surmised that David was sick of life with his family. Killing them would not only free him, but he would also get about $650,000 from life insurance policies that were taken out on all 3 of the dead family members. 3 months before the murders, David and Kimberly had purchased 2 policies that covered her and the children. But they did it fraudulently. They purchased the policy from David's brother, who could only sell insurance in Florida to Florida residents. When filling out the forms, they listed David's address as his brother's home in Osceola, Florida. They also made it look like Kimberly had been in Florida when she signed it, but she actually had been home in Indiana. David was adamant that he did not commit the murders. He maintained he left the house at 7 p.m. and then got home at 9:30. The police determined the family was killed at about 7:30. However, the police obtained the home phone records and discovered that David had called a business client at 7:19 p.m. David Camm went to trial in January 2002. The prosecution used the insurance paperwork as evidence. They also had 12 of the 15 women testify about their relationship with David. Some of them had been intimate and some were ongoing. The best piece of physical evidence was Jill's blood on David's shirt. A blood splatter expert testified. He said it was high-velocity blood splatter. He believed the only way it could have gotten onto the shirt was when it splashed on David when he shot his daughter at close range. Also, David told the police he had not touched Jill. Kim's blood was also found on one of David's socks and shoes. David's lawyer argued that the 12 affairs proved that David was an unfaithful husband, not that he had killed his family. The police believe that the family was killed around 7:30 p.m. 11 people testified that at 7:15 p.m. David was at the gymnasium and stayed for the next 2 hours. The prosecution pointed out that the home phone record showed he made a call at 7:19 p.m., therefore the witnesses had lied. The family had their phone services with Verizon. A Verizon technician testified there had been an error in the records. Most of Indiana is in the Eastern Time Zone, except for 12 counties in the Northwest and Southwest areas, which are in the Central Time Zone. Verizon's computers are in one time zone, and the family's home was in another. The technician testified that the records were incorrect and that David made the call at 6:19, not 7:19. David's lawyers argued that there were explanations for the blood evidence. He pointed out that blood splatter analysis is more subjective than scientific. Jill's blood could have gotten on David's clothes when he reached over her and pulled Brad out of the car. Also, David put Brad next to his wife's body and kneeled to perform CPR, and that's probably why he got Kim's blood on his sock and shoe. There was also evidence that someone else was in the garage that night. It was the sweatshirt that was found under Brad's body. It had Kim's blood on it. David claimed it wasn't his sweatshirt and he had never seen it before. It was tested for DNA and it did not have David's DNA on it. It did have DNA of an unknown man. The district attorney said that the DNA had been submitted to the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, aka CODIS, but no match was found. The trial lasted for 2 months and the jury deliberated for 28 hours over 3 days. David was found guilty of murder. The jury said that Jill's blood on his shirt was stronger evidence than the 11 alibi witnesses. In April 2002, David Camm was sentenced to 195 years of prison. His lawyers filed an appeal. In August 2004, the Indiana Court of Appeals overturned his conviction. They ruled that it was prejudicial to include the evidence of David's infidelities. A new trial was ordered. In early 2005, David's lawyer learned that despite the prosecution claiming that the DNA found on the sweatshirt had been submitted to CODIS, it had not been submitted. When it was finally entered into CODIS in February 2005, they got a match. It was the DNA of 35-year-old Charles Boney. At the time of the murders, Boney was on parole after serving 7 years of a 20-year sentence for armed robbery. Over 23 hours on February 17th and 18th, the police interviewed Boney. He said the sweatshirt had been his, but he donated it to the Salvation Army before the shooting. Then the police confronted him with more evidence that placed him at the crime scene. His palm print was found on the vehicle Kim was driving. Boney then told them 5 inconsistent stories. His final version of events for that day was that David wanted to buy a gun from him. They had previously met at a basketball game. Boney said on the night of the murders he brought an untraceable gun to the family's home. He met with David in front of the house. When David's family arrived home, David took the gun and walked into the garage. Boney claimed he heard screaming and then 3 gunshots. David then came after him. Boney said he ran into the garage and that's when he touched the vehicle. He was able to escape from David. David's lawyers believed it was more likely that Boney was solely responsible for the murders. It did not appear that Camm was sexually assaulted, but some elements suggest that the murders were a sex crime gone wrong. Camm's pants had been pulled down and her shoes were off. Boney had a history of sex crimes involving women's feet. Between October 1989 and January 1990, he attacked 4 women. He stole shoes from 3 of the women. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail and 5 years of probation. In September 1991, while on probation, Boney was caught writing bad checks and sent back to jail. In October 1992, he was out of prison and he robbed 4 women at gunpoint. In March 1993, he was sentenced to 20 years of prison for armed robbery. In June 2000, after serving 7 years, he was paroled. 3 months later, Kim, Brad, and Jill Camm were all killed. In March 2005, Boney was charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 count of conspiracy. On January 10, 2006, Boney's trial opened. The main evidence against him was that his shirt was found at the crime scene, his palm print was found on Kim's vehicle, and he said he was at the crime scene and brought the gun. A week later, while Boney was still on trial, David Camm went to trial again for the murders of his wife and children. The prosecution could no longer use the infidelities as evidence for the motive. At the second trial, they had a new motive. They claimed that David had been sexually abusing Jill, and either Kim knew about the abuse or was going to find out about the abuse, so he killed the family to cover it up. The defense pointed out there was no evidence that David had sexually abused his daughter. Charles Boney's trial lasted 2 weeks, and then the jury deliberated for 14 hours. He was found guilty of all charges. He was sentenced to 225 years of prison. David's trial was ongoing, and the jury was not allowed to be told that another man had been found guilty of the murders that David was on trial for. Also, David's lawyer could not talk about Boney's history of sex crimes involving women's feet. David's second trial featured much of the same evidence from the first trial, like the blood splatter analysis. David also had a solid alibi, which 11 people verified. The trial lasted 8 weeks, and the jury deliberated for 44 hours, or 4 days. David Camm was found guilty of murder a second time. He was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole. Members of the jury said they believed that David was the only one who could sexually abuse his daughter, so he killed the family to cover up the abuse. Once again, David's lawyers appealed. In June 2009, his conviction was overturned again. The Court of Appeals said that the prosecution prejudiced the jury, saying that David molested his daughter and he was trying to cover up the crime. There was no evidence that David ever sexually abused his daughter. The district attorney decided to try David Camm for a 3rd time. David's 3rd trial started on August 12, 2013. This time, Charles Boney testified that he brought the gun to David and David shot the family. At the 3rd trial, there was new DNA evidence. Boney's DNA had been found on Kim's underwear and Jill's shirt. Kim's broken fingernail was on Jill's shirt. On the fingernail was DNA that could have come from Boney. David's lawyer argued that Boney had worked alone. 11 people saw David at the gym when the murders were committed. This time, the jury deliberated for 10 hours. David Camm was found not guilty. After spending 13 years incarcerated, he was released from prison. In 2016, David reached a settlement with Floyd County, Indiana for $450,000. 6 years later, he settled with the state of Indiana for $4.6 million. Since being acquitted, David Camm has mostly stayed out of the public eye. At the time of this video, he is 60 years old. 55-year-old Charles Boney is serving a sentence at the Pendleton Correctional Facility in Madison County, Indiana. His earliest release date is September 21, 2017. On December 10, 1979, 33-year-old John McCure was found dead in his Sacramento, California apartment. He died of an overdose of alcohol and antidepressant medication. It's believed he purposely overdosed. The night before, he and his mother had argued about his drinking. McCure's funeral was held on December 15th. There was a private burial scheduled for 10 a.m. on December 17th. His body was being held at the Memorial Lawn Mortuary in Sacramento. On the morning of December 17th, McCure's body was in a 1975 black hearse parked at the mortuary. When the driver went to the hearse to deliver the body to the cemetery, they discovered that the hearse and John McCure's body were missing. They also learned that one of the employees who lived in an apartment above the mortuary, 21-year-old Karen Greenlee, was missing. She was an apprentice embalmer who had worked at the mortuary for about 5 months. Everyone considered her a quiet but competent employee. The morning that McCure's body went missing, Greenlee left the mortuary around 4 a.m. She said she was going to pick up a body and bring it back to the mortuary. However, the vehicle to do those pickups was still parked at the mortuary. An All Points bulletin was put out for the hearse. About 36 hours after Greenlee went missing with the hearse, sheriff's deputies found the hearse partially hidden behind some bushes over 100 miles from the mortuary near Allegheny, California. 3 sheriff's deputies and a California Highway Patrol officer surrounded the car. It was locked, but they discovered that Greenlee was in the back of the hearse with a body. They tried to get her to come out, and she refused. They spent 90 minutes convincing her to exit the vehicle before she finally relented. She told them she had swallowed 20 pills of codeine Tylenol. She was taken to the hospital and her stomach was pumped. The police found a 4.5-page note written by Greenlee. In the note, she revealed that over 2 months, she had sexual contact with 20 to 40 men's dead bodies. She wrote, quote, "I'm a necrophiliac, alcoholic, scared, mixed up, lonely, unadjusted adult. My life is a nightmare. I wish I never grew up. I wish I could have killed myself in 1973. I almost did, never could do anything right. Why do I do it? Why? Why? Fear of love, relationships hurt in the past. No romance ever hurt like this. It's not much fun to look into the eyes of a young widow after making it with their loved ones. It's the pits, I'm a morgue rat. This is my rat hole, perhaps my grave." Unquote. The police then began to investigate 21-year-old Karen Greenlee's background. She was born in 1958 in California. According to her father, when she was 8, she was sexually molested by a neighbor. Her family noticed a change in her, but they didn't find out till later that she had been abused. At age 14, she was raped by a teacher. 2 other students accused the teacher of rape as well. The teacher was charged and Karen Greenlee testified against him. He was found guilty. That same year, Greenlee was hospitalized due to emotional problems. In her letter, she wrote that around this time, she started sleeping in cemeteries. Greenlee graduated from high school in 1978 and became an apprentice embalmer at a mortuary in Auburn, California. But she left the job after a few months because she was having problems controlling her necrophiliac feelings. Then in August 1979, she started working at the Sacramento Memorial Lawn Mortuary. Starting in October, she began to have sexual contact with the bodies. Greenlee was interrogated, and she said it was a compulsion she couldn't control. She compared it to an addiction. At the time, California did not have any laws against necrophilia, so she was charged with stealing the hearse and body snatching. In March 1980, she pleaded guilty and served 11 days in jail. She was fined $255 and sentenced to 2 years of probation. John McCure's mother sued Greenlee and the mortuary. In her letter, Greenlee wrote that the other mortuary employees probably knew what she was doing. McCure's mother was seeking $1 million to $1.5 million. Greenlee testified at the hearing. She admitted to engaging in necrophilia with the bodies of 20 to 40 men, including McCure's body. She never explained why she stole McCure's body. She also talked about her childhood, which included being sexually assaulted by her neighbor and her teacher, and her problems with alcohol. The jury found Greenlee and the mortuary liable, and Merced's mother was awarded $142,500. Many of the jurors felt sorry for Greenlee and hoped she would get help with her mental health. After the trial, Greenlee stayed out of the media spotlight for 5 years. Then, in 1987, she was interviewed by Jim Morton for his book, Apocalypse Culture. The interview took place in Greenlee's apartment, which Morton described as, quote, full of books, necrophiliac drawings, and satanic adornments. Greenlee said she was more comfortable with her sexuality than she was when she wrote the infamous 4.5-page note. She said, quote, when I wrote that letter, I was still listening to society. Everyone said necrophilia was wrong, so I must be doing something wrong. But the more people tried to convince me that I was crazy, the more sure of my desires I became, unquote. She said that men thought she was necrophiliac because she couldn't get a living man. They were convinced that if she had sex with them, they would cure her of her desire to sleep with corpses. Greenlee was asked how she physiologically had sex with the dead men. She said that sexual penetration wasn't needed for sexual gratification. She went on to say, quote, I find the odor of death very erotic. There are death odors, and there are death odors. Now you get your body that's been floating in the bay for 2 weeks, or a burn victim. That doesn't attract me much, but a freshly embalmed corpse is something else. There's also this attraction to blood. When you're on top of a body, it tends to purge blood out of the mouth while you're making passionate love. You'd have to be there, I guess, unquote. She also said that after she stole the hearse and Merced's body, she got a job at another funeral home in a different state, and she continued with what she called her, quote, extracurricular activities, unquote. They said it took them a year to figure out what she was doing, and she was fired. She said that necrophilia is more common than one might expect, and funeral homes simply don't report it. A transcript of the interview was printed in the book under the title, The Unrepentant Necrophile. Greenlee supposedly regretted the interview and changed her name. Karen Greenlee has stayed out of the public eye since then. Her current whereabouts are unknown. If she is still alive, she would be about 67 years old. In the winter of 1983, the Murrell family lived in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. They moved to Edmonton from Niagara Falls, Ontario, a few years earlier. Jack and Vivian Murrell had 2 children, 6-year-old Tania and 5-year-old John. Jack was a carpenter and Vivian managed a bakery. Jack and Vivian liked to party and had many friends. On January 20th, 1983, Tania and John attended school. They lived about 600 yards from the school. At 11:10 a.m., it was lunchtime. Usually, Tania and John walked home together. But that day, a teacher saw Tania walk off by herself. When John left class, he discovered that Tania wasn't there, so he started walking home alone. That day, both Jack and Vivian were at work. Tania and John's aunt was preparing lunch for them at the family's home. John arrived home, but Tania didn't. Their aunt immediately started searching the neighborhood for her, but she couldn't find any trace of the 6-year-old. Tania's parents were called, and they rushed home. When Tania didn't return to class in the afternoon, the police were called. It eventually led to one of the biggest searches in the history of Edmonton, but no trace of 6-year-old Tania Murrell has ever been found. No one saw or heard anything unusual that morning. It was as if she vanished into thin air. The first suspects were Jack and Vivian Murrell, but they both had solid alibis. They were both at work miles away when she went missing. They also passed several polygraph exams. The police didn't think that Tania was kidnapped for ransom money because the family did not have much money. Another thing the police looked at was if someone involved in Jack and Vivian's partying lifestyle was involved. They thought it was possible Tania was kidnapped because Jack was in debt to a marijuana dealer, but the police ruled out that possibility. Tania was aware of stranger danger, and her family did not think she would have gone with a stranger. She followed a routine and walked the same route every day to get home for lunch. So the police suspected that someone she knew kidnapped her. The police narrowed in on a suspect who was only identified as Uncle Al. Supposedly, Vivian and Jack were told to be careful around the man. He apparently had violent tendencies. One time during a card game, he smashed a beer bottle into another man's face. However, Vivian and Jack thought the man was harmless. He apparently took John and Tania camping shortly before Tania went missing. Also, just before Tania's disappearance, he wrote a bizarre poem about love that couldn't be pursued. The man was questioned, and he did not have a strong alibi. He said he was working outdoors at the time, but he had no way to verify it. 10 years after Tania's disappearance, the man was interrogated for 11 hours. He supposedly didn't deny killing Tania. Instead, he said something to the effect that they had nothing on him because they didn't have a body. The man took a polygraph, and the results were inconclusive. Months after Tania went missing, the man, known only as Uncle Al, moved over 2,000 miles away to Ontario. After he moved, his wife had a daughter whom he named Tania. Uncle Al died in August 2016 from cancer. Uncle Al is supposedly the suspect in another child's death in Alberta. Elk Island National Park is about 30 miles east of downtown Edmonton. 9-year-old Kevin Reamer was camping with his family there in June 1979, about 3.5 years before Tania went missing. On June 29th, Kevin was playing at a playground a short distance from the campsite where his mother was making lunch. When she went to get him, she discovered him missing. Massive searches were conducted, but no trace of the 9-year-old boy was found. 11 days later, the search was called off. 10 years later, in June 1989, Kevin Reamer's body was found in the national park not far from where he was last seen. The cause of death was not released. The police thought he might have wandered off and died, but the area where his body was found was searched by people walking arm in arm. So it's suspected he was murdered, and then his body was put in the area after it was searched. Supposedly, the man who called the police to report Kevin missing was Uncle Al. However, the police have never publicly identified the man as a suspect in Kevin's death. Unfortunately, Tania Murrell's disappearance devastated her family. 3 years after Tania went missing, Vivian and Jack had another daughter, Elysia. However, they drank heavily and did drugs to deal with their pain. They both contracted hepatitis C, and it led to lifelong health problems. Jack ended up losing one of his legs. The couple split up in the 1990s. Jack died in 2005, and Vivian died in 2011. John Murrell, who was 5 years old when his sister went missing, had a lot of problems. Not only did he lose his sister, but his parents were obsessed with her disappearance and did not pay much attention to him. They were very lenient with him, so he was rarely punished. In his 20s, he started hanging out with the wrong crowd. He started using and dealing cocaine. He was often in and out of prison. In 12 years, he racked up 30 convictions. In early 2012, he was driving drunk and a police officer tried to pull him over. He didn't stop and ended up hitting a police officer with his car. He broke the officer's shoulder. In January 2015, 37-year-old John was out of prison. He told a journalist with the Edmonton Sun that he was clean and he was trying to turn his life around. He was working for a flooring company. He was still hopeful that his sister's case would be solved. But tragically, weeks later, John Murrell was found dead in his halfway house. The cause of death for the 37-year-old man was not released. Licia, the only family member who is still alive but wasn't alive when Tania went missing, believes that Tania is still alive. In early 2013, she was living in Niagara Falls, Ontario, where she worked as a nurse. Every year, on the anniversary of her sister's disappearance, she takes her children to the falls. She throws a red rose into the falls in honor of her sister. She said she plans to do that every year until Tania comes home. If Tania Murrell is still alive today, she would be 48 years old. In early 1992, 12-year-old Shanda Scherer lived with her mother in New Albany, Indiana. On January 10, 1992, her father picked her up to spend the weekend with him, her stepmother, and half-sister. Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence, both 15, knocked on Shanda's father's door early that evening. Both Hope and Tony were strangers to Shanda. Hope and Tony explained they were friends of 16-year-old Amanda Heverin. Shanda and Amanda were friends, and they both had crushes on each other. Shanda met Amanda when she got into an argument with Amanda's cousin, and Amanda jumped in to stop the fight. All three were given detention. Amanda and Shanda became friends while in detention. In the autumn of 1991, Shanda and Amanda attended a school dance together. But Shanda's parents were concerned about the relationship between their 12-year-old daughter and the 16-year-old girl. In November 1991, they transferred Shanda to a private Catholic school. Hope and Tony said that Amanda was hanging out in an abandoned stone house called the Witch's Castle. Shanda told the two girls she couldn't go out now because her father and stepmother were awake. She told them to come back after midnight. Around 12:30 a.m., Hope came to the door again with another girl, 17-year-old Lori Tackett. Lori was also a stranger to Shanda. Once again, Hope asked Shanda if she wanted to come with her to see Amanda. Shanda was hesitant, but ultimately agreed to go with them. Tony, who came to the door earlier, was in the car. Shanda got into the middle front seat. Then Hope started driving. What Shanda didn't know was that 16-year-old Melinda Lovelace was hiding under a blanket in the back seat of the car. Melinda had been dating Amanda Heverin. The relationship had cooled off, but they had not officially broken up. Since her parents' divorce over a year earlier, Melinda had been acting erratically. She had been violent and gotten into fistfights. Melinda felt that Amanda was cheating on her with Shanda. This made Melinda furious, and she decided she was going to kill 12-year-old Shanda. She decided to enlist the help of her friend, 16-year-old Lori Tackett. Melinda told Lori she wanted to beat up and scare Shanda. Lori's friends, Hope Rippey and Tony Lawrence, arrived at her home earlier that night. It was the first time Melinda had met Hope and Tony. Melinda talked about how much she hated Shanda and showed them a kitchen knife that she wanted to use to scare Shanda. Hope and Tony decided to go along with Melinda and Lori. On the way to Shanda's home, Lori talked about how she planned on scaring her. She also said she couldn't wait to kill Shanda. After Shanda was in the car and they had driven a few miles, Melinda sprang up from the back seat. She held a knife to Shanda's throat. They drove to the abandoned house known as the Witch's Castle. All 5 girls got out of the car. Melinda and Lori held Shanda's arms and led her into the building. Lori had rope and she tied Shanda's ankles and Melinda tied her wrists. They took off Shanda's rings and her Mickey Mouse watch. Hope put the watch on and it played music. Hope then danced to the music. They had an extra t-shirt and they set it on fire. Melinda told Shanda they were going to do the same to her. But then the girls were spooked when a series of cars drove by. Lori knew of a place that would provide them with more privacy. They went to a clearing in the woods in Madison, Indiana, near Lori's home. Once again, all 5 girls got out of the car. Shanda pleaded with the girls not to hurt her and to let her go home. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. Melinda forced Shanda to undress. She then decided to keep her clothes as a souvenir. Lori held Shanda while Melinda punched her. Melinda then repeatedly slammed her knee into Shanda's face. Melinda tried to slit Shanda's throat, but the knife was too dull. She then tried to use her foot to push it into her neck, but it still didn't cut Shanda's throat. Melinda sat on Shanda's legs while Lori sat on her stomach. Lori tried to strangle the 12-year-old girl with her bare hands, but she didn't lose consciousness. So Lori strangled her with the rope until she lost consciousness. Melinda and Lori then reloaded Shanda into the trunk of the car. The 4 girls drove to Lori's home with Shanda in the trunk. They went inside and drank some soda. After several minutes, they could hear Shanda screaming. Lori grabbed a paring knife from the kitchen. She went out, opened the trunk, and stabbed Shanda repeatedly. She came back in and washed the blood off herself. Lori suggested going for a drive because she thought it would be best for them to drive around and wait for Shanda to bleed to death. Hope and Tony said they were tired and just wanted to sleep, so they stayed at Lori's home. As Melinda and Lori drove around, Shanda struggled in the car's trunk. They pulled over and Lori got out of the car. She struck Shanda in the head with a tire iron. A chunk of her skull broke off. They drove some more and they decided to check on Shanda. When they opened the trunk, Shanda sat straight up. She was covered head to toe in blood. Her blonde hair was now red. Her eyes had rolled back in her head. They closed the trunk again and continued to drive around. When Shanda started to make too much noise, they would stop and Lori would bash her in the head with the tire iron. They eventually drove back to Lori's home and cleaned up. Lori excitedly told Tony and Hope what they did to Shanda. The girls then got back into the car and drove to the clearing. This time 3 of the girls got out of the car: Melinda, Lori, and Hope. Tony didn't want to see Shanda. They opened the trunk door. Hope had a bottle of Windex and she sprayed it on Shanda's wounds. They talked about the best way to finish off Shanda. She had been beaten, strangled, stabbed, and bludgeoned with a tire iron. They decided to set her on fire. They went to a nearby gas station and filled an empty 2-liter soda bottle with gas. Then they drove to a cornfield. Tony didn't want to help, so she stayed in the car. The 3 other girls got out and opened the trunk. Melinda was disgusted by the goriness and wouldn't touch Shanda. So Hope and Lori wrapped her in a blanket and got her out of the car. Lori then ordered Hope to pour gas on Shanda, and she did so. Lori lit a match and dropped it on 12-year-old Shanda Scherer. They watched the body burn until the fire went out. They started to drive away, and then Melinda told the driver she wanted to return. She was worried that the body wasn't burned enough. She then poured the remaining gas on the smoldering body. When she returned to the car, she made fun of Shanda because her tongue had been going in and out of her mouth. She also said she was happy the 12-year-old girl was dead. They went to McDonald's for breakfast. Supposedly, Lori joked that Shanda now looked like one of the breakfast sausages. Later that morning, Shanda's burned body was found. It was burned beyond recognition. The medical examiner determined she was alive when she was set on fire. It was also determined she had been sexually assaulted with a tire iron. Shanda's father woke up to discover Shanda missing. Shanda's family spent hours looking for her. They reported her missing that afternoon. Hours later, Hope and Tony came with their parents to the police station. They told the police about the murder. The next day, Melinda and Lori were arrested. The state planned to try all 4 young women as adults. That meant they could get the death penalty. They eventually all agreed to plea deals and they pleaded guilty. Lori Tackett and Melinda Loveless both pleaded guilty to felony murder, and they were both sentenced to 60 years in prison in January 1993. Weeks later, Tony Lawrence was sentenced to 20 years in prison after pleading guilty to criminal confinement. Hope Rippey pleaded guilty to arson, criminal confinement, and felony murder. She was sentenced to 50 years in prison. In 2004, Hope's sentence was reduced to 35 years. Shanda's father, Stephen, took the death of his daughter hard. In December 2005, when he was 53, he died from complications from alcoholism. His family said he drank himself to death. At the time of this recording, all 4 women involved in Shanda Scherer's murder are out of prison. In December 2000, Tony Lawrence was released after serving about 9 years in prison. Hope Rippey was released after 14 years in April 2006. Lori Tackett was released on the 26th anniversary of Shanda's murder, January 11, 2018. Melinda Loveless was paroled in September 2019 after serving 27 years of prison. Bryan Charles Kocis was born in Larksville, Pennsylvania in May 1962. After graduating from university, he became a medical photographer, but he left that to run his own business. In 2000, he was a partner in a cellular telephone company. Then, in July 2001, he was arrested for having sex with a 15-year-old boy twice in his home. Kocis had met the boy through the internet and brought him to his home in Dallas County, Pennsylvania. The first time they had sex, Kocis videotaped it. Kocis claimed that the boy lied about his age. As a result of his arrest, Kocis was removed as a partner from the cell phone business. He established a gay pornographic studio called Cobra Video. It specialized in videos featuring young men who look like adolescents having unprotected sex. He charged $3.95 for 17 minutes to $49.95 for 575 minutes of video on his website. In May 2002, Bryan Kocis pleaded guilty to sexual abuse of children. He was given a year probation. Meanwhile, Kocis' pornography studio was successful and he made a lot of money. A year later, in 2003, a 21-year-old man in California contacted Kocis. He said he wanted to perform in Kocis' videos. Kocis wasn't interested in the young man because he didn't find him attractive. Then, the man showed his boyfriend, 16-year-old Sean Lockhart, on the webcam. The young man told Kocis that Lockhart was 17, going on 18. Kocis and Lockhart then started communicating daily. Kocis was living in flophouses and struggling to get by. He thought that adult films would be a good way to make money. So he and his boyfriend scanned his driver's license and birth certificate and altered them in Photoshop to make it look like he was 18. They sent the photoshopped images to Kocis. Then, in September 2004, Lockhart traveled to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where he recorded 2 scenes for Cobra Video. He He earned $3,500. Lockhart continued to act in videos for Kocis' company. He started using the name Brent Corrigan. Kocis also started to have sex with Lockhart. Kocis told Lockhart that he was worried that he had altered his driver's license and birth certificate. Kocis felt a strong attachment to Lockhart. Kocis asked Lockhart if he wanted to be his apprentice for the summer of 2005. Lockhart agreed, and he moved into Kocis' house. In August, Kocis discovered, although Lockhart had recently signed an exclusive contract with Cobra Video, he planned to start his own production company with his boyfriend, Grant Roy, in San Diego, California. Kocis was furious. Lockhart became afraid, so he got into the car he got for signing the contract with Cobra Video and drove from Dallas County to San Diego. Once Lockhart was home, he told the FBI he had been a minor when he recorded his first 4 scenes for Cobra Video. Kocis applied to get the trademark for Lockhart's stage name, Brent Corrigan. He also sued Lockhart for breach of contract. Kocis and Lockhart's boyfriend, Grant Roy, then started feuding on an internet forum about gay pornography. Kocis used the name King Cobra, and Roy used the name Cobra Killer. Lockhart went on to star in a mainstream gay pornographic movie for another company, but he didn't use his stage name. Cobra Video removed 6 titles featuring Lockhart from their website and asked distributors not to sell them. In mid-January 2007, Kocis and Lockhart verbally settled their lawsuit. Kocis would receive 20% of sales from movies featuring Lockhart. On January 24, 2007, at 8:30 p.m., days after the settlement was agreed upon, the fire department was called to Bryan Kocis' home because it was on fire. Volunteer firefighters were there in 2 minutes and put out the blaze. After the fire was put out, they saw that the house had been ransacked. They found a charred body inside. Using dental records, it was determined to be the body of 44-year-old Bryan Kocis. He was killed when his throat was slit with one forceful slash. He had nearly been decapitated. He then had been stabbed 28 times in the torso and once in the groin area. It was determined that the fire was an act of arson. Several computer towers, laptops, and 2 video cameras were stolen. The police learned that 2 days before the murder, a man who claimed his name was Danny Mullen contacted Kocis. The emails came from a Yahoo account, DM Bottom PA. Mullen also sent several photos of himself. Mullen wrote that he was interested in working for Cobra Video. On the night of the murder, Kocis had invited Mullen over to talk about the production. Mullen last communicated with Kocis at 6:23 p.m., just hours before the murder. On February 2, 2007, the police released a photo of Danny Mullen. Several people called the police and said it was 25-year-old Harlow Quadra. They learned that Quadra lived with his boyfriend and business partner, 31-year-old Joseph Kocis, in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Quadra and Kocis met in 2001 in a Yahoo chat room. At the time, Quadra was in the Navy and Kocis was in the Marines. They eventually started dating. Kocis was also an escort and he eventually got Quadra involved in the business. They started an escort service in Norfolk, Virginia. Their website, NorfolkMailEscorts.com, became the top result when people searched for Norfolk. They also started a pornographic studio called Boy Batter. They made military-themed videos. The police searched Quadra and Kocis' home. They found 2 cameras that were the same make and model that were taken from Kocis' home. About 5 days after the murder, Quadra posted a message on a forum about cameras, asking for help in operating them. On January 23, 2007, the day before the murder, Quadra purchased a knife that was similar to the knife used in the murder. He bought it with his Visa credit card at a pawn shop near his home. The police got surveillance footage from the pawn shop and it recorded him buying the knife. A detective also got a receipt for the knife. It was also determined that the emails from Danny Mullen came from Quadra's computer. Besides one test email, the only emails sent from Mullen's account were to Kocis' email address. Also, the day before the murder, Kocis and Quadra rented a silver 2006 Nissan Xterra. A white or silver SUV was seen driving away from Kocis' home just as the fire was detected. Later that same day, using Kocis' ID, they checked into a hotel near the crime scene. The two men regularly went to the gym but didn't go on January 23rd or 24th. The police also think they discovered the motive. Kocis and Quadra's businesses were lucrative, but they spent beyond their means. They were $1 million in debt. In late 2006, Sean Lockhart's boyfriend and business partner, Grant Roy, had been looking on escort websites for performers for their videos. Roy came across Quadra's profile and they started chatting. Less than 2 weeks before the murder, Harlow Quadra, Joseph Kocis, Sean Lockhart, and Grant Roy were in Las Vegas for the Adult Video News Convention. On January 11th, the four men met for dinner. They wanted Quadra and Lockhart to make a movie together. They thought they would profit $1 million from it. Lockhart and Roy expressed that they would be interested, but they explained they were still involved in the lawsuit with Kocis. Roy told the police that at dinner, Quadra and Kocis implied that they could have Kocis killed. Roy said that he and Lockhart assumed they were joking. What Quadra and Kocis didn't know was that the lawsuit had been settled by the time Kocis was murdered. Sean Lockhart and Grant Roy agreed to cooperate with the police. They moved forward on the plans to make a video featuring Quadra and Lockhart. On April 27th and 28th, the four men met on a beach in San Diego to finalize the deal. When they met, Quadra and Kocis implied that they were involved in Kocis' murder, but they didn't come out and admit they had killed the 44-year-old man. The police believe that Harlow Quadra posed as a prospective performer to get into Bryan Kocis' home. Then, while he had Kocis distracted on the couch, Kocis snuck into the house and then slit Kocis' throat. On May 15, 2007, 4 months after Bryan Kocis was murdered, Harlow Quadra and Joseph Kocis were arrested. In December 2008, Kocis pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without parole. Harlow Quadra pleaded not guilty and went to trial in February 2009. There was a lot of evidence against him, like the emails, the cameras found in his home, and the evidence that he bought a knife similar to the murder weapon the day before the murder. Plus, the same day he bought the knife, he rented a car, and at the time of the murder, he was at a hotel close to the crime scene. The prosecution had 93 witnesses testify. The defense only had one, which was Harlow Quadra, who wanted to testify on his own behalf. He testified against the advice of his lawyer. He claimed he was innocent and that it was Kocis who killed Kocis. Quadra said that he was in Kocis' home when Kocis came in and slit his throat in a jealous rage. The trial lasted 11 days. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found 27-year-old Harlow Quadra guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life without parole. At the time of this recording, 43-year-old Harlow Quadra is serving a sentence at the State Correctional Institution at Cole Township in Pennsylvania. 51-year-old Joseph Kocis is incarcerated at the State Correctional Institution at Huntingdon, Pennsylvania. In August 1993, Ranbing Yi, who went by Jennifer, lived in Mission Vallejo, California. She came to the United States from China about a year earlier. She had a 5-month-old son, Kevin. On August 18, 1993, Jennifer and Kevin were found dead in their apartment. Jennifer had been stabbed 18 times and was bitten on the arm. Kevin had been suffocated with a piece of clothing. The police immediately got the sense that the murders were personal. Nothing was stolen from the home. There were no signs of a break-in or forced entry. It suspected that Jennifer knew her killer and let them into the apartment. Also, the violence of the murders was intense and showed a lot of rage. It seemed like the actions of someone who hated Jennifer. Also, why did the killer do anything to Kevin? The police investigated Jennifer's personal life. In October 1990, Jennifer was working as a hostess in China. She met Peng, who went by Jim. Jim, who was in his 50s, was an electronics tycoon estimated to be worth over $200 million. He split his time between Taiwan and Rancho Santa Margarita, California. Initially, Jim hired Jennifer to work for him. In May 1991, they started a romantic relationship, and she became pregnant with Kevin. Jim moved Jennifer to the United States and financially supported her. Jim was the one who discovered the bodies. The police investigated Jim, but he had an ironclad alibi. He was out of the country on business when the murders were committed. When he got back to California, the first thing he did was go to the apartment and find the bodies. Jim was also given a polygraph, which he passed. It turned out that Jennifer was Jim's mistress. Jim was married to 44-year-old Peng, who went by the name Lisa. Lisa and Jim had 2 teenage children. Lisa had quit her career to help support Jim's business, which turned out to be very successful. The police learned that Jennifer and Lisa were aware of each other. One time, Lisa returned home early from a trip and discovered Jim and Jennifer together in their home in California. One time, Lisa found Jennifer's clothes in her closet, so she cut them up. Lisa confessed that she had confronted Jennifer several times, but maintained she didn't kill her. However, the police believed that Lisa killed Jennifer in a fit of jealousy. It would also explain why Kevin was killed as well. The police got a DNA sample from Lisa. They compared it to the DNA from the saliva and the bite mark. 4 months later, the police learned that Lisa's DNA was a match to the saliva. Lisa was interrogated for 9 hours. Then Jim was brought into the interrogation room to help translate questions for booking. Jim asked for a private moment to speak with his wife, and the police consented. However, the police recorded their conversation. They spoke to each other in Mandarin. Lisa got mad at Jim for having the affair. Jim asked Lisa why she killed Jennifer. Lisa admitted going to Jennifer's apartment and biting her. She said that Jennifer attacked her with the knife, and then she fell onto the knife. The last words on the recording were Lisa saying, quote, "Don't say anything, I won't admit," unquote. The police had interpreters listen to the recording and make a transcript. After Lisa's arrest, she maintained her innocence, and she was supported by her husband, Jim. Jim even testified on her behalf at the preliminary hearing. However, when Lisa went to trial in August 1995, Jim was out of the country. The prosecution presented the DNA evidence and the transcript of Lisa admitting to being in Jennifer's apartment when she was killed as evidence. The defense had a different theory about the murders. They said that Jim arranged the murders. He was worried that a divorce would be a scandal for his company. The jury deliberated for 6 days. They could not reach a unanimous decision. The vote was 10 for conviction and 2 for acquittal. The two men who voted for acquittal weren't convinced that Lisa was in Jennifer's apartment when she was murdered. At the time, DNA evidence was still considered a new technology, and some people in the general public didn't understand or trust it. The O.J. Simpson trial was the first famous trial to use DNA evidence. Lisa's trial coincided with the Simpson trial. Since the jury was hopelessly deadlocked, a mistrial was declared. The district attorney decided to try Lisa again. Lisa Peng's second trial started in February 1994. It was the same evidence as the first trial. Once again, Lisa's lawyer said that Jim was the real killer. The lawyer said that Lisa and Jennifer were both victims of Jim. Once again, Jim was not in the United States for the trial. The trial lasted about 7 weeks. Then the jury deliberated for 5 days. This time, Lisa Lang was found guilty of first-degree murder. In September 1996, she was sentenced to life in prison. Then, 3 years later, in October 1999, there was a shocking twist. Lisa's conviction was overturned. The appeals court ruled that the statements Lisa made to her husband about being in Jennifer's apartment were inadmissible. After 9 hours of interrogation, Jim was brought into the room to translate for booking questions. Lisa, who was frazzled, talked to her husband when she thought they were having a private conversation. The appeals court believed that bringing in Jim was a form of coercion. Lisa Peng went to trial for a third time in May 2001. It had been 8 years since the murders of Jennifer and Kevin Yee. Throughout the ordeal, Jim and Lisa had stayed married. He visited her in jail when he was in California. However, he was out of the country for his wife's third trial. Once again, the DNA evidence was used to show that Lisa had killed Jennifer. However, the transcript of her admitting to being in Jennifer's apartment, biting her, and then Jennifer falling onto the knife wasn't allowed as evidence. The defense acknowledged that Lisa did bite Jennifer. However, they claimed that she bit her in a fight days before the murders. They said there was no evidence that Lisa was in the apartment at the time of the murders. The trial once again lasted about a month and a half. Then the jury deliberated for 6 days. Once again, a mistrial was declared because the jury was deadlocked. This time it was 8-4 to convict. The 4 people who wanted to acquit did not believe that the bite happened during the murder, but days earlier. Days after Lisa Peng's third trial for murder, the district attorney offered her a plea deal, and she accepted. 11 days after the end of her trial, Lisa pleaded guilty to 2 counts of manslaughter. She was sentenced to 11 years, which included time served. Because of good behavior time, she was eligible for parole immediately. Lisa was released, but as part of the plea deal, she was deported to her native Taiwan, where her husband lived. It's unknown what happened to Lisa Peng after she was deported, but many believe she went back to her life as an affluent wife of a tycoon. For murdering 25-year-old Jennifer Yee and 5-month-old Kevin, Lisa served about 8 years in prison. At the time of this recording, if Lisa Peng is still alive, she would be in her mid-70s. May 5th, 1997 was a national holiday in England. So 8-year-old Jamie Lavis of Openshaw, East Manchester didn't have school that day. Jamie left his home early that morning. Tragically, that afternoon, Jamie did not come home. His frantic parents, John and Karen, reported him missing. Searches for him were launched. But in the days afterward, there were multiple sightings of Jamie. Some of the reports were from people who knew Jamie. In the media, Jamie was portrayed as a runaway who was living in makeshift shelters. He was stealing food and drinks from stores and dodging the police. In the newspaper, he was called the Artful Dodger. But none of these sightings led to Jamie. 2 days after Jamie went missing, 28-year-old bus driver Darren Vickers went to Jamie's family's home. Vickers lived a few streets away from the family, but didn't know them. He was a father of 4, and his common-law partner was pregnant again. Vickers said that he saw Jamie on the day he went missing. Vickers explained that he was a bus driver, and Jamie had ridden his bus that day. Vickers said, quote, "I believe I'm the last person to see your son," unquote. After that initial meeting, Vickers quickly befriended Jamie's family. He purchased cigarettes and snacks for John and Karen. He even bought Jamie's older brother a bicycle. Vickers became heavily involved in the search for Jamie. He spent hours looking for him. Vickers then started talking to the media on behalf of the family. The police immediately suspected that Darren Vickers wasn't a good Samaritan. Instead, they believed he was responsible for Jamie's disappearance. They thought his behavior was incredibly odd. For example, when he first introduced himself, he told Jamie's family, quote, "I believe I'm the last person to see your son," unquote. Why wouldn't he just say Jamie was on his bus that day? The investigators thought that by saying he was the last person to see Jamie, he was implying he knew what happened to the boy. The police also noted that it seemed like Vickers always needed to be the center of attention. There were also more subtle clues, like when Vickers would say he was innocent but shake his head. So on May 24th, 1997, the police arrested Vickers for kidnapping Jamie. Vickers told the police what happened on the day Jamie went missing. He said he purchased an all-day pass for Jamie and he let him ride the bus. He said he knew Jamie because he had taken his bus several times. Vickers said that Jamie sat on the bus quietly all day. At the end of his shift, Jamie remained on the bus as he drove it to the depot. At the depot, Vickers transferred Jamie to his own car. He drove Jamie and dropped him off near his home. Again, the police thought that this was odd. Why did he spend the day with Jamie? Also, why did he not drop the 8-year-old boy off directly at home? After Vickers was arrested, the police searched his home. They found nothing to connect him to Jamie's disappearance, so he was released. Upon his release, Karen and John Labus threw him a party. Vickers then moved out of his home and into the home of the Labuses. Vickers explained to people he thought it'd be easier to live with them because he was there to help them through this difficult time. He slept in John and Karen's bed and they slept in the den. Vickers also regularly listened to a police scanner. When the sightings were reported, he would take someone in Jamie's family to the area where he was spotted, and they would be there before the police. Vickers would always be adamant that the sightings were real, and convince Jamie's family, who was dreading that he was dead, that the person really did see Jamie. The police thought that Vickers did this to divert suspicion away from him. Vickers also took Jamie's older brother, Joe, to public places. Joe, who was only 2 years older than Jamie, looked a lot like him. After Vickers and Joe visited these public places, the police would get reports of people claiming they saw Jamie there. The police were convinced that Vickers was the killer, so they continued to investigate him. They talked to people who were on the bus the day Jamie went missing. They said that Vickers was very friendly with Jamie. They thought Jamie was his son because of the way he let Jamie act on the bus. He was running up and down the aisle and even using the gear shift. This contradicted what Vickers said, which was that Jamie sat quietly on the bus all day. The police also decided to look at Vickers' alibi for the evening of Jamie's disappearance. He claimed he had been at his mother's home with his partner, their children, his sister, her boyfriend, and a family friend. They all verified that he was there most of the night. Then the police talked to a neighbor of Vickers' mother. He said he was sure that he saw Vickers at his mother's home at 7 a.m. The police knew this wasn't possible because Vickers was working at 7 a.m. So they challenged him about this, and he said that he didn't see Vickers that day. He had been told to tell the police he saw Vickers at around 7 p.m., not a.m. He agreed to do it because he didn't want any problems with the family. Although the police did not have any physical evidence, on October 14, 1997, they arrested Darren Vickers for kidnapping. They believed Jamie was dead, so they continued to search for him. The police learned that Vickers had led 2 searches in a wooded area near Reddish Vale Golf Club. The police decided to search the area. On October 25, 1997, more than 5 months after 8-year-old Jamie Lavis went missing, the police found the clothing Jamie wore on the day he vanished. In the pocket of his pants, they found a golf ball. A short distance away, they found human remains, including a jawbone and a torso. However, the skull, arms, and leg bones were missing. It was determined to be the remains of Jamie Lavis. The cause of death could not be determined because of the missing bones. After the body was found, an inmate at the jail where Vickers was being held contacted the investigators. He said that Vickers had confessed to him that he had killed Jamie. He told them that Vickers said he threw the head, arms, and legs into a nearby river. This was important because the fact that the body parts were missing had not been made public. On November 23, 1997, Vickers was charged with murder. After he was charged, Vickers admitted to being involved in Jamie's death. He wrote a 15-page confession. He wrote, quote, "I'm not sure where it went wrong. Jamie was starting to mess with the ticket machine. I told him, 'Don't, you'll jam it.' I raised my left hand and hit him on the side of the head. I looked round and braked hard. Jamie, when I hit him, fell back, hitting his head on the luggage rack. His eyes were closed. I started to panic bad. Christ, I've killed him. I did not mean for anything like this to happen." Unquote. He loaded Jamie's dead body into his car and dumped his body near the golf course. But then, days later, Vickers retracted his confession. He later retracted the retraction. Nevertheless, the police knew that Vickers wasn't telling the truth in his confession. They believed that Jamie was still alive when they got to the golf course. Near his remains, they found his pants. In one of his pants was a golf ball. They think that Jamie found the ball at the golf course, picked it up, and put it in his pocket. Darren Vickers went to trial in March 1999. The prosecution alleged that Vickers spent the day grooming Jamie on his bus. He then took him to the golf course where he sexually assaulted and murdered him. By Vickers' own admission, he was the last one to see Jamie alive. The prosecution pointed out that his stories about what happened to Jamie were inconsistent, and he had coerced someone into lying about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. He also admitted causing Jamie's death in his 15-page confession. Also, the inmate who said he confessed to him knew details about the murder that had never been made public. Vickers' lawyer argued there was no physical evidence. Vickers testified and he denied killing Jamie. He claimed he dropped him off near his home and that was the last time he saw him. He alleged that Jamie's father, John, was the killer. He also said that Jamie's mother, Karen, didn't seem to care that Jamie was missing. He claimed that shortly after moving in with the Lavises, he and Karen started to have a sexual affair. The prosecution said there was no evidence of this, and this was just Vickers continuing to torment Jamie's family. The trial lasted 7 weeks, and the jury deliberated for 13 hours. Darren Vickers was found guilty of murder. After his conviction, but before he was sentenced, Darren Vickers confessed to the murder to the lead detective on the case. The details of the confession have not been made public. Darren Vickers was then sentenced to life with a possibility of parole after 25 years. This made him eligible for parole in 2022. Vickers has applied for parole, but he's been denied every time. It's believed that 56-year-old Darren Vickers is currently serving his sentence at HM Prison Franklin in Durham. The rest of Jamie Lavis's remains have never been found. In early 1995, the Feeney family lived in Springfield, Missouri. John and Cheryl Feeney had 2 children, 6-year-old Tyler and 18-month-old Jennifer. John was a high school science teacher and Cheryl was a nurse. She was a team leader for the gynecological surgery unit at a nearby hospital. The Feeneys lived a quiet, suburban, middle-class life in Springfield. On February 25, 1995, John left for a multi-day teachers' conference about 130 miles away in Jefferson City, Missouri. Cheryl and the children remained home. On the morning of February 27, 1995, 36-year-old Cheryl did not arrive at work. Her mother was notified and she went to the family's home. Inside, she found the dead bodies of Cheryl, Tyler, and Jennifer in their beds. The murders were brutal. Cheryl and Tyler were beaten with a metal pipe or a metal rod. The blunt object was not found at the crime scene. Cheryl was struck 10 times, while Tyler was hit 7. Meanwhile, Jennifer had been strangled with a cord from the curtain rod. It was still wrapped around her throat. When the bodies were discovered, John was at the conference. The police found him there and he was questioned about the murders. John said he had been at the conference for the past 2 days. Many people have verified they had seen him several times at the conference. No one noticed anything unusual about him, and he even ran a session. The police investigated the crime scene and they thought it had been staged. The back door was splintered open as if it had been pried open. The house had been ransacked. Drawers were pulled out and the contents were dumped on the floor. Cheryl's purse and jewelry were missing, but no cash had been taken. Cheryl's car was parked in the garage with its hood up. A charger was attached to the car battery, but there was nothing wrong with the battery. The trunk was full of items taken from the family's home. In the master bedroom, where Cheryl was killed, there was a message written on the wall in beige paint. It was 2 words, die and bit. Some people believe that the killer was attempting to write, die bitch. Throughout the home, there were shoe prints made with the beige paint. All the family's photos were turned around to face the wall. John was questioned 2 more times over the next several days. The police determined that the family was killed on February 25th, hours after John left for the conference. John said that on the evening of February 25th, he had dinner with a friend. At about 8 p.m. that night, with the same friend in his car, he was pulled over for speeding in Osage Park, Missouri. 2.5 hours later, John was at the Osage Park Police Department paying for a speeding ticket. The police department was about 90 miles from the crime scene. The next time John could verify his whereabouts was the next morning at 6:59. He bought breakfast at McDonald's and he had a receipt. After breakfast, John played golf with colleagues. He was then at the conference for the rest of the day. He called home around 5 p.m. and there was no answer. Then that evening, he attended a social event for the conference. No one answered the home phone when he called again around 11 p.m. The next morning, the bodies were found. After 3 interviews, John hired a lawyer. With his lawyer, he did a 4th interview with the police. John was asked to take a polygraph, and on the advice of his lawyer, John refused to do it. He also refused to talk to the police and would only answer through his lawyer. The police then publicly named John as the sole suspect in the case. The police determined that the family was killed on the night of February 25th, which was the first night John was away. By John's own admission, he did not have an alibi for the time between 10:30 p.m. when he paid for the speeding ticket and 6:59 a.m. when he purchased McDonald's. During those 8.5 hours when he didn't have an alibi, his family was murdered. John had more than enough time to leave the resort where he was staying for the conference, drive the 90 miles to his home, which would have taken less than 2 hours, kill his family, stage it to make it look like a bizarre robbery gone wrong, and then return to the hotel undetected. The police also believe they had uncovered a motive. 4 months before the murders, Cheryl's life insurance policy was increased to $500,000. A handwriting analyst reviewed the documents for the insurance, and he said there was evidence that Cheryl's signature was a forgery. He said it looked like someone had drawn the signature like it was a picture instead of a natural handwritten signature. The same analyst compared John's handwriting to the words splattered in paint on the wall, die and bit. He said it could have been John's handwriting. The police also found 4 women who said they had an affair with John. The police concluded that John was sick of his life as a family man, so he killed them to collect the life insurance money so he could start a new life. Also, John played the tabletop role-playing game Vampire the Masquerade. The police believe that this fascination with the game was evidence that John had a dark fantasy life. He perhaps embodied his character from the game to commit the murders. The problem was that the police didn't find any evidence that placed John in the same city when the murders were committed, let alone place him at the crime scene. But then, in March 1995, weeks after the murders, the police talked to Ron Gann, an employee at a gas station a few blocks from the family's home. He was shown a photograph of John and his car. He said the morning of the murders, John came to the gas station and bought $10 worth of gas. However, the district attorney still did not charge John Feeney. Over a year went by and no progress was made in the case. Then, on April 10, 1996, there was a grand jury hearing and John was called to testify. John invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and didn't answer a single question. 12 days later, John was charged with the murders of his wife and children. John Feeney went to trial for the murder of his family in late 1996. The prosecution argued that John was sick of his boring, suburban family life. He pretended to be a monster like he did in Vampire the Masquerade and killed his family for the insurance money. As evidence of this, the 4 women he had an affair with testified. The prosecution also pointed out that John did not have an alibi for the time of the murders. Also, John was seen in Springfield around the time of the homicides. The prosecution also argued it appeared that the crime scene had been staged. Why would anyone else want to stage the crime scene? John's defense lawyer argued that the motive didn't make much sense. John and Cheryl were financially stable. They both had good jobs, they had money in their bank accounts, and they also had investments. An insurance salesman who talked to John 8 months before the murders testified. He told John and Cheryl they probably needed more life insurance. Then 4 months later, John purchased more insurance for himself and Cheryl so that they were both insured for $500,000. The insurance agent testified that amount of life insurance isn't unusual for people with their types of jobs and who also have young children. The defense acknowledged John may have had affairs, but this proved he was an unfaithful husband, not a killer. Also, the main evidence that put him near the crime scene was from Ron Gann, the gas station worker who said John bought gas at his station on the morning of the murders. It turned out that between March 1995 and February 1996, the police questioned Gann 4 times. In each interview, he gave different times when he claimed he saw John. It ranged from 1 or 2 a.m. to 4:10 a.m. Also, the defense got Cann's work records, and it proved he was not even working that night. The person who was in the hotel room next to John's room testified. They said they heard noises coming from his room in the middle of the night. Based on the time they heard the noises, John wouldn't have had enough time to drive home, kill his family, and then return. Several people who were with John on the morning of the murders said that they did not notice anything unusual about him. The defense pointed out that not only was there no physical evidence that John committed the murders, but there was evidence that someone else was in the house that night. For example, it was determined that the light bulb in the automatic garage door opener had been unscrewed enough so that it didn't work. When the police checked it, they screwed the light in and it worked. The defense pointed out that the killer had been in the garage. Cheryl's car was parked there with the battery attached to a charger. Also, items from the house had been loaded into the car. The defense argued that the killer unscrewed the light to hide in the dark while they were in the garage. On the light bulb, the police found fingerprints that did not belong to John. No match has ever been found. Also, there was a hair found on Cheryl's bloody nightgown. The hair did not belong to John, and the source of the hair remains unknown. There were also shoe prints and paint around the house. The prints were smaller than John's size 12 shoes. It was a bloody crime scene. The killer was also probably likely splattered with beige paint. The prosecution alleged that John drove his car from the resort to his home, killed everyone, and then drove back to the resort. Yet no blood, paint, or any other physical evidence was found in John's car. The defense even had a motive as to why someone else may have wanted to kill the family. Someone may have been trying to ensure that a life-changing secret never got out. It turned out that 7-year-old Tyler had an infection. He had hepatitis B. There are several ways to contract hepatitis B, but the most common way is sexual transmission. The defense argued that the family was killed because the killer thought that once it was discovered that Tyler had hepatitis B, then he might reveal who infected him. The trial lasted 8 days. The jury deliberated for 5 hours. They acquitted John Feeney of all charges. After the trial, John moved to South America, and his current whereabouts are unknown. The murder of his family remains unsolved. Some believe John was the killer and he got away with it. Other people think he is completely innocent and suffered a horrible nightmare. Over 30 years later, the murders of Cheryl, Tyler, and Jennifer Feeney remain unsolved, and the case is cold. In the spring of 1982, 25-year-old Christine Prince lived in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Prince was from Porthcawl, a small seaside village in Wales. She came to Toronto in October 1981 to be a live-in nanny for a family with a 3-year-old daughter. Prince was happy in Toronto. She enjoyed her job and made several friends. She even met a man and was engaged to be married. She was thinking of attending university in Toronto. She liked the city and felt safe walking alone, even late at night. June 21st, 1982 was a rainy night in Toronto. Prince went to a movie theater with a friend. After the movie, she caught a bus that dropped her off close to the home where she was the nanny. She got off the bus around 1:30 a.m., about 5 blocks from her employer's home. Hours later, when her employer woke up and discovered that Prince had not returned home, they reported her missing. About 24 hours later, a motorist spotted Christine Prince's new dead body floating in the Rouge River about 30 miles from where she got off the bus. It was determined that the 25-year-old nanny had been sexually assaulted and beaten. She was dumped into the river while still alive, and she drowned. After the murder made the news, two people contacted the police. The first was a woman who was seen walking close where Prince lived. She said the morning Prince was murdered, she found an umbrella in the middle of the road. Since it was raining, Prince was carrying an umbrella. Prince's employer confirmed it was her umbrella. The police believe that this indicates that she was forced into a car as she was walking from the bus stop to her home. Then a highway worker contacted the police. He found Prince's wallet on the side of the highway, not far from the body. The police think that after he dumped Prince in the river as he was driving away, he tossed the wallet out the window. Immediately, there was speculation that Christine Prince wasn't the killer's first victim. Jennifer Isford was 19 years old and lived in North York, a city in the Greater Toronto Area. She was training to be a cheerleader with the Toronto Argonauts, a team in the Canadian Football League. Isford was passionate about the arts and wanted to be a professional actress. About a month before Christine Prince was killed, on the night of May 27, 1982, Isford went to cheerleader practice. She then went out for drinks with her fellow cheerleaders. She then traveled by subway and then got on a bus with a stop close to her home. She got off the bus around 1:30 a.m. A few hours later, 19-year-old Jennifer Isford's partially clad dead body was found on her neighbor's lawn. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. The similarities between the two murders were obvious. Christine Prince was kidnapped about 10 miles away from where Jennifer Isford was killed a month earlier. Both victims were young, white women who were walking home alone after 1:30 a.m. after getting off the bus. No arrests were made in either case, and they both went cold. Then, in 1995, 13 years after the murders, the police made an arrest in one of the cases. 35-year-old William Brent Henson was charged with the murder of 19-year-old Jennifer Isford. Henson had been a suspect in her murder from the start. Henson had a criminal record involving sex crimes dating back to 1977 when he was just 17 years old. Isford was killed after she got off the bus. The bus driver told the police that he saw a young man get off at the same bus stop and he was walking in the same direction as Isford. The bus driver described the young man and his description sounded like Henson. The police asked Henson for a sample of his saliva and he gave them some. It was compared to the semen sample. At the time, DNA testing was not available. But what the testing did reveal was that the killer had type A blood and was a secretor. Henson had type A blood and he was a secretor. So the police were able to get a search warrant for his home. In his bedroom, they found a locked briefcase. In the briefcase was women's lingerie. One of Isford's co-cheerleaders said she remembered that Isford wore pantyhose after rehearsal. The police did not find her pantyhose at the crime scene. But in the briefcase, they found a pair of ripped pantyhose that matched the description of the pantyhose Isford wore that night. However, the police did not think that there was enough evidence to charge Henson. On July 13, 1982, a few weeks after the murder, Henson attacked a 19-year-old woman in her apartment building's elevator. He was charged with sexual assault, causing bodily harm, and choking. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years of prison. Henson served his entire sentence, and when he was released in 1993, the police issued a public warning that he was to be considered dangerous. In early 1995, the police were surveilling Henson. They collected a cigarette butt he had discarded. The crime lab was able to get a DNA sample and compared it to the DNA of Isford's killer. It was a match. On March 17, 1995, nearly 13 years to the day of 19-year-old Jennifer Isford's murder, William Henson was arrested. Henson went to trial 2 years later in March 1997. The trial lasted 2 months and the jury deliberated for 2 hours. Henson was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life without the chance of parole. One thing the police knew was that Henson did not kill Christine Prince. Prince was killed on June 22nd, and Henson was arrested on June 12th for attacking the 19-year-old woman in the elevator. So he was in jail when Prince was killed. So Christine Prince's case remained unsolved. However, the police did have Prince's killer's DNA, and it was uploaded to Canada's National DNA Databank. In 2016, the police were alerted that the DNA matched another unsolved murder. Over a year after Prince's murder, on September 1st, 1983, 23-year-old Claire Sampson, who was doing sex work, was looking for clients outside of a hotel in Toronto. About 5 hours later, her new dead body was found in a field about 70 miles north of where she was last seen. Sampson had been shot twice in the head. Linking the two crimes did not provide any clues to the killer's identity. Then, the following year, in 2017, DNA linked a third murder to the killer. It happened in July 1997, over 15 years after Christine Prince was killed, and 14 years after Claire Sampson was murdered. 41-year-old Gracelyn Greenlee was a nurse at a retirement home in North York. When she didn't come to work on July 29, 1997, a co-worker went to her North York apartment. Inside was Greenlee's dead body. The cause of death was blunt force trauma. The police found no connection between the three women besides being killed by the same man. The man's identity remained elusive. In 2022, the Toronto police contacted the private DNA lab, Othram Inc. In 2025, they found a familial branch of the killer. In December 2025, the police announced the identity of the killer. His name was Kenneth Smith. Smith would have been in his mid-30s when Christine Prince and Claire Sampson were murdered. The police have not released much information about Kenneth Smith. What is known is that he's from Porcupine, Ontario, which is now a neighborhood of Timmins, a city in northeast Ontario. He lived in different areas of Toronto at the time of the murders. The police also said that Smith was a convicted sex offender, but they did not give details about his convictions. In 2013, Smith moved 200 miles southwest of Toronto to Windsor, Ontario, a city across the river from Detroit, Michigan. The police were not able to charge Kenneth Smith with the murders of the three women. He died in Windsor in 2017 at age 72. The police said if he were still alive, they would arrest him. But they now consider the murders of Christine Prince, Claire Sampson, and Gracelyn Greenlee closed. The police think it's possible that Smith has other victims, and they are going to continue to investigate him and compare his DNA to DNA of unsolved cold cases. If he is connected to other cold cases, we'll provide an update in a future video.